Have our final panel put together a group of experts that are going to have a conversation about building the early literacy pipeline and share their insights into why a whole child approach, starting in the early years, is so important. So I'm going to ask that they start to join us on the stage. So please join me in welcoming the panelists. And we're going to start with our moderator, Dr. Paul Stanton, who is the superintendent of the Washington Elementary School District. And next, we're going to welcome to the stage Dr. Robin Blitz, who is the Director of Development Pediatrics at the Phoenix Children's Hospital. And she will join us when we find her. I'm going to invest in LoJack next summit so that we just keep something on them and I know where they are at all times. The next, Riley Fry, from the superintendent of Bullhead City Elementary School District, who is a real champion for early childhood education, so thank you. Welcome, Riley. And then Jordan Kraus, who is a principal at AmeriSchools down in the Tucson area. We're happy to have you. And then Dr. Marvin Lobato, the superintendent of Fowler Elementary School District. Thank you for joining us today. And then our champion truly at the state level, Don Wallace, who's the Director and Education Policy Advisor for the Governor's Office of Education. And we will just start, Dr. Stanton, with the panelists we have, and then when I find...
Right back there.
Oh, here she comes.
Coming up right now.
It's like on the Oscars when you go to the restroom, right at the worst time to accept your Oscar, right? Sorry to put you on the spot there, but we want you to get the recognition. So thank you for being part of the panel and come join us on the stage. She's got to get her notes. And as I said, Dr. Blitz is with the Phoenix Children's Hospital. She's the Director of Development Pediatrics. So what a great panel. We're excited to hear the conversation, and I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Stanton.
Like great educators, we modify and adjust immediately. So Dr. Blitz, welcome to the stage. We appreciate it. So, because my first question has to be for you. So I was either doing that or balloon arts. So there you go. So could you please, Dr. Blitz, from a physician standpoint view, can you share your thoughts on the importance of what we're talking about today, which is the early part of the educational continuum? And particularly, what's your view on the impact of the child's early development on literacy?
Right. Well, you know, I'm so excited to be here and learn about Read On Arizona because I've been in Arizona for 20 plus years and did not realize that all this wonderful work was going on, right? Of course, I know about Reach Out and Read because it's sponsored by American Academy of Pediatrics, and we have a wonderful chapter in Arizona that was established in 2002, and of course, it's really there to engage pediatricians in promoting literacy and early reading and getting books into families where a lot of families don't even have access to books or library cards or anything like that. And as a developmental pediatrician, one of the talks that I give to our residents every year is about early brain and child development and how the parents are the first people that need to be there to engage their children by talking to their children. And it's always amazing to me when I have parents who don't think that the babies understand anything they're saying, so why is it important to talk to a child? And I was really inspired by Dana Suskin's talk yesterday and about the 30 Million Word Project, and certainly we know that children who are talked to more have better vocabulary and better education overall. And many of us have children and we know all of this, but most of our families out there, the families that I serve just aren't aware of how important it is to talk to children and read to their children and or don't have access to books. So from a health point, it's a huge part of what we need to be doing in anticipatory guidance in our well child visits, which is what Reach Out and Read tries to do.
I appreciate that as well. So Riley, you're working up in Bullhead City, obviously an area in the northern part of Arizona, but and supporting the idea of developing a pipeline of helping children come ready to learn. So Bullhead City prides itself on being well-rounded, providing a well-rounded education and focusing on this term we call the whole child. So can you tell us, what is that focus on the whole child, and what does that mean in early years as far as your district?
Yes, thank you. I first want to say how honored I am to be in the room today. You know, I've been an educator in Arizona for 15 years, and I think in some things we've gotten things right, and in some things we've gotten things very wrong. Anytime we get a group of people that are experts in the room, we solve problems, but when we operate in isolation, we cause problems, and that's been the case in our state. You use the example of this program that we're working on with third grade literacy, and yet we've cut funding entirely for early childhood education and compound that with only funding half-day kindergarten. So, you know, it's quite the conundrum for each of us in the school business to deal with. And if communities can get in the room and experts get around a table, there's no problem that they can't solve. And so I've been fortunate enough in my years in Bullhead City to get in the room with people and say, what do we want to accomplish? What is it that we're trying to do here, and how can we form partnerships to do that? The notion of the whole child is nothing new. We've talked a little bit about the Olympics today, and Christy Yamaguchi's here, and you know, it's wonderful to see people that are excited about healthy lifestyles, but the arts are equally as important. And when we talk about children coming to school happy, healthy, and ready to learn, we want them excited to learn. And frankly, I went to school, I won't say that I am one, but I went to school with a whole bunch of guys that wouldn't have graduated from high school if there hadn't been a football team. So it's important for us to have activities as a community in our elementary schools and in our early programs that promote that type of a lifestyle. And I think we're on track.
Appreciate the input. So, let me get that right. Principal Jordan, there you go, thank you. But Jordan, we heard a little bit about the medical need, you know, now you're hearing the idea of the whole child focus. You're a principal up at a PK8 school down in Tucson. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of that early part of that pipeline so that you're getting your kids ready for these early grade successes? You heard a little bit about the whole child. Can you piggyback on it? What are you guys doing down there in Tucson?
It's critical. Last year was the first year we brought in a pre-K program to our school, and we just started the school year, as many of you have, and we've just finished our early year screeners with our kindergarten students, and about a quarter of our kindergarten population this year came from our pre-K program, and a little over 80% of that population at this point of the year are the highest achieving in terms of proficiency levels that we'd expect a kindergarten student to come into this. So that speaks volumes. And we're hoping to continue to funnel those students in through our K through 8 program. Gosh, I'm going to echo a lot what's already been stated here. It's real simple. Give kids an environment that is loving, that is welcoming. The conversation critical. My first child is 19 months, and I'm learning from a parent perspective just how savvy and alert those 18, 19-month-old kids are in terms of what they hear, what they repeat. So it's real critical to establish a positive, loving culture within the classroom. How many K through 3 educators, pre-K through 3 educators do we have here? Okay. It's hard to see all the hands, but I'm assuming there's many. It starts with you. It starts with you, and administrators that are out there, I urge you to value those teachers. They've got a tough job, a really, really, really tough job, and I feel that the best thing that I can do, and I think that our district does well, is we support those teachers and invest in them and get them excited to teach these little ones who can be a challenge at times. So. We're just keeping it real simple. We're loving these kids. It's a family. It's a home at our school, and that's where you have to start.
So a little theme there, need nurturing at the early ages, whole focus, and love. Marvin, known you a long time, good to see you. Fowler is participating in the preschool development grant that Arizona received. In fact, we heard it from our speakers earlier. What has that meant for Fowler, and what do you hope for the outcomes to be?
Well, for us, it's been a wonderful program. We've been able to enroll many more preschoolers and service them than we have in the past. We have a wonderful Head Start program that services 196 3- and 4-year-olds. But with the preschool development grant, we were able to add another 152 children. And for the size of Fowler, which is about 5,000 children overall, we still had a waiting list of children whose parents would love to see them in a preschool. And for us, every elementary school in our district right now, which there are 5, they all either have one preschool development program and a Head Start program, or they have 2 Head Start classrooms. But on every campus, we have a minimum of 2 preschool classrooms. We are so proud of that, and we couldn't have done it without the help of our friends over at ADE that I know are over in the corner someplace. But I want to thank them because they're on the end of the phone when we call and want to know how do we do what. But as a superintendent, my whole goal is to make sure that my staff has what they need. And so that means sometimes you just have to go knocking on doors, picking up the phone. Our children are involved with the Great Start program through the City of Phoenix during the summer, which focuses on any child that has not entered kindergarten but is about to. They have different museums they get to go visit. The school district just has to provide the transportation, which has been absolutely wonderful. I'm going to take a minute and thank Dawn, who brought Lady Ducey over to one of my schools in May. And they were sponsored by Scholastic, who came in and read to one of our classrooms, but also delivered books to some of our children. Rodale Foundation brought some little library literacy kits to our schools and into our community. And so for me, it's a matter of making sure, as everyone agrees, the earlier we get kids involved in school and a book in their hands, the better off they'll be. We have been following our Head Start children now for 8 years and tracking them according to the state standard assessment. Our children in Head Start that have stayed with us outperform our non-Head Start children. And we're very proud of that, and we hope that as our preschoolers become age eligible and grade eligible to take the assessment, that we see the same results.
Thanks for sharing. You mentioned Dawn. So, Dawn, we all heard the governor speak earlier, and you're obviously part of the governor's office, and we appreciate the support. Can you share your thoughts on the unique role that the governor's office plays in helping to support early literacy in Arizona?
Thank you, Superintendent. So I think my response would be a lot longer if you hadn't just heard a speech. But I think that what he considers to be his role is that of a statewide leader that assigns a significant value to the work that's being done by everyone here in the room around early literacy. He was very clear in making a commitment to this effort, to being a partner to this effort, to raising the public awareness around early literacy. And he cited a few things that we've done, certainly our reading programs and working with Scholastic and some of our other efforts. But I think most importantly, as the leader of the state, he has been fairly clear since he became governor that the student's proficiency in third grade reading is the first and most important benchmark in their educational progression. And because they need to hit that mark in order to be successful, we need to, as leaders, to emphasize and work around the legislature. I think my mic went out, right? Yeah, okay. Was anyone hearing me, though? I have a pretty loud voice. And so I think that the governor here today was very clear, and we'll continue to work with our partners at Read On, our school systems, in all sectors. With the legislature, Representative Norgaard has been an amazing champion around reading, and we want to do more. We want to increase rigor. We want to ask our students and our teachers to help raise the bar and to get our kids prepared, and we want to be there to partner along the way. So thank you.
That's good. One thing I mentioned earlier, I'm the superintendent of Washington School District, and we'll talk throughout about not only you're hearing the early intervention, early identification, whole child love, which I think is an absolute factor that needs to be there, but the need to have a qualified educator in those early childhood classrooms, even pre-K, are equally as important. Retention and attraction of folks to Arizona is paramount for us to help solve this teacher crisis, and it's pre-K as well. So I know a lot of you are out there struggling. We know the governor's aware of the shortage of teachers pre-K through post. So we appreciate, again, that knowledge because without educators in the classroom, you can have the best of programs, but without the folks to deliver. Dr. Blitz, some of the folks in the audience may not know that you're known for leading the way for the autistic diagnostic. I noticed earlier we talked a little about dyslexia, now we're going to talk a little bit about autism and the autism diagnostic clinic model at the Phoenix Children's Hospital. So can you, first of all, for the audience, describe your unique approach, and then can you share with us maybe how we could take some learnings from the medical and see if we could apply it to the educational world?
Sure. And I'm not a short talker, so I'll try really hard. I usually overstep my times, but I'm a board-certified developmental pediatrician, and I've been at Phoenix Children's for 7.5 years. And I have 3 fabulous nurse practitioners who work with me. Unfortunately, it's not easy to recruit more developmental pediatricians because there aren't that many of us in the country, and there aren't that many of us in the state of Arizona. And unfortunately, 2 of our developmental pediatricians in Phoenix, one, Dr. Kessler, retired in July, and Dr. Ellis is retiring in December, which means that really leaves us at Phoenix Children's for Maricopa County for taking Access, our state's Medicaid program. So I have over 3,000 children who have been referred and never scheduled yet from the last couple years. And so we received a really generous grant from the Board of Visitors 2 years ago because there was no way that we were going to be able to see all of these kids. And in the rest of the state, we have Dr. Rice and her group in Tucson. We don't have a lot of those of us who see young kids and who take Access. That's I think, part of our key, because we have we have child psychiatrists in private practice who can diagnose autism but don't necessarily take Access, and same with some of the psychologists. Anyways, we developed a program called Early Access to Care Arizona, where we're training pediatricians in regional teams modeled after other programs in states across the country. And their regional team consists of the pediatrician, the early intervention person, and a school person to do assessments and provide earlier diagnosis for autism. So in Arizona, our average age of diagnosis is now 4 years, 7 months. The rest of the country, it's about 3 years, 11 months right now. Parents have concerns at 18 to 24 months of age, and we really should be identifying those kids before their 3rd birthday, and hopefully within 3 to 4 months of a parent's concern. So by training the pediatrician not just to screen for autism, but to diagnose autism with the support of the school and early intervention assessment, and provide that child with a medical home, and then we're providing telemedicine support to our rural colleagues. I'm not having to see every single kid that has a concern for autism, and can exponentially increase the number of pediatricians out there across the state who can diagnose and provide medical homes to kids with autism. But it's also building those partnerships, because the pediatrician in Yuma didn't really know the early intervention people and didn't really know the school people, and now they're getting together. And we suggested getting together for coffee once a month, but it's really getting together for wine once a month. But it's really building those great relationships, and what we've really found that it has to be local people and local solutions, because what I think might not work in Lake Havasu or Yuma or Maricopa or Casa Grande. And we're also working with the pediatricians to build regional resources so that once they identify children with autism or other developmental disabilities, that's the other piece, it turns out that for every 10 kids that fails the MCHAT, our screening test that we want all the pediatricians to be doing at 18 and 24 months of age, only 4 or 5 of those kids may indeed have autism. So the pediatricians are also going through this 6-month learning collaborative with me, and learning what to do with those other kids who may have hearing impairment or a chromosome anomaly, or be in a neglectful home, or just need special needs preschool. So it's really been exciting for me and very heartwarming. We're going to be starting our 3rd cohort of pediatricians. And we're collaborating with some other states as well to develop best practice. And I think that by expanding the Read on Arizona concept and expanding Reach Out and Read into the pediatric and family practice. I don't want to forget about our family practice colleagues because they see tons of kids, especially in those rural communities. Making people aware. I know she talked about awareness, but that is the first step. And then we know that there's beneficial outcomes to providing books to families and encouraging parents to read to their children. And it gets so hard when you have two working parents or a single parent and they're working 1 or 2 jobs and you come home after a long day and you want to read to your child, because every parent wants to be a good parent to their child, right? Every parent wants their child to be happy and healthy and successful. And I know myself, I used to sit on my kid's bed and we'd start reading a book and I would fall asleep. And then Aaron would take over and read to Sam, thankfully. So, and it's a challenge, but it's an important challenge. And if we can share with parents and expand that information to our pediatricians, our family practice docs, share with them to share with parents the importance of talking and reading to their children, and the pediatrician's often the person that sees those kids on a regular basis, right, in those early years when those synapses are being connected. So I think that certainly it's a model that we can build on, right, by engaging our rural partners and using telemedicine for training. I mean, all those pediatricians do not come to Phoenix for training. We are doing it all via webinars and learning modules and reading materials and case-based treatments. So I certainly think that can be modeled for your teachers and your therapists and your other educators. See, I'm a long talker, sorry.
Concerned with a pediatric doctors promoting the benefits of wine, but we'll come back to that
Yeah,
later.
well,
So,
not when you're pregnant. It's only when you're old like me.
I think the point you're making is that if the partnerships that we have work closely together as early as possible, the more research we know, the 30 million, these types of things, that we can actually working together, and we're about to turn to Riley in a rural area of what are some of the things that are working to try to get that done early. So I think, again, a common theme is the earlier we can figure out the needs of the children and meet the needs of the children, they'll be successful in school. So Riley, up in Bullhead City, you've got an early childhood center. So if you could piggyback a little bit on, tell us more about why the strategy may be working for you up there, up in Bullhead.
Absolutely. We have a kind of an interesting situation there. We have kind of an interesting situation in Bullhead City. In some ways, we're the stereotypical rural Arizona community. In other ways, we're very unique. You can throw a rock from several of our schools, literally, and it will land in Nevada or in California. So that, that with gaming being a predominant industry there with Laughlin, Nevada and such, it creates some unique things. But in the same sentence, we're, 1 in 4 of our children are coming to kindergarten having had preschool. So we kind of stick right to par with Arizona in that regard. And I'm fortunate to chair the Regional Partnership Council for La Paz and Mojave counties, and so that's given me an opportunity to have some voice in trying to move the needle in early childhood programs in our community, and that's been a real blessing. Now, the good news is the program that you mentioned, the Tiny T-Birds, is in my big high school, about 1,300 students in the high school, and we have at any given moment between 120 and 150 students in the early childhood education program, right there with a laboratory on campus. So we have about 60 to 70 students that come, or children that come, birth to 5, and they're right there in a 5-star quality first-rated early childhood program on our campus. So it serves it serves 2 purposes. Number one, it provides a phenomenal child care facility and child education facility, but it also promotes the students at the high school the notion of getting involved in early childhood education and hopefully come back to that business. In the end, however, I think the point is if we're ever going to solve the bigger pictures in our society, it has to start early. We talk so much about third grade reading and the significance of third grade reading, but there's an even bigger body of research that suggests that where a child is performing at the end of first grade is an indicator of where they'll be performing the rest of their life. So if you have a child that's behind at the end of first grade, you're going to constantly be trying to play catch up with that child, and the interventions get more and more expensive and less effective with age. So ours is the responsibility, again, to get them in as early as we possibly can and begin working with them so that they are on track as they come to kindergarten and can stay on track. Much like has been mentioned today, we actually have preschools at every one of our campuses. All of our elementary schools have preschools, and virtually every single student that are coming out of our early childhood programs, our preschool programs, are our lighthouse classrooms in our kindergarten. And so we're seeing that move through, and as was suggested, the first group that we had come through, the teachers were saying, what do I do? I've planned for, these skills, and all of these children already have them. I have to go back and rewrite lesson plans and start all over again because they're that much further ahead. So that's a blessing. We need 90% of the children coming to us so that our intervention money can go farther. Or 100 would be fantastic.
Yes.
I'd take 50 right now.
Well, and I'm hearing a pattern that if early intervention occurs and it's done well with good folks, look what can happen. So it's pretty amazing. We're going to turn a little bit. So Jordan, for some are aware, we have a new K3 you field tested, as we did too, actually, the formative K3 assessment tool for Arizona. What'd you learn from this, and how do you feel? How can we use this to help us again gain for our early children?
Test? I'm good. Hold on to the mic. What a neat opportunity to field test this K-3 formative assessment pilot. We have one teacher at our site, Mrs. Burgo. She's here. I'm going to embarrass you for a second. Right here, she's our third level teacher. She took on the challenge. Exemplifies what I think all of our teachers need to be, which is taking risks and jumping into something that might be a little more extra work, but in the end gives us the results that we need. And speaking about the whole child, I think the K-3 formative assessment does just that, because I ask all of you as teachers, if you were to look at all the, a traditional report card of your incoming students, how much information does that really give you? They got an A in reading, what does that mean? Or a B in math. It's not really specific. And this K-3 pilot really targets skills like their ability to persist and show emotional stability in certain situations, and following directions, fine motor skills. And this pilot gives kind of a formal means for teachers to gather data. I mean, we want to be data-driven, but what does that mean, right? And this, I think, provides the type of data that educators really need to know where students are at on their continuum of development and how we can plan for their future. So it's been really, really exciting. We're looking forward to going into year number 2 with this formative assessment. And what I like about it is it highlights and focuses on assessment through observation. Again, all the teachers here, probably many of you are just sick of assessing, right? Assessing your students. I think it's easy to over-assess, but I think this forces us to look at what assessment really is, and it's observing kids within the context of their learning and their development. And this pilot's been very exciting, and we look forward to going into year number 2 with it, and are expecting some great things. No pressure, Mrs. Burgos, year number 2. Go to it.
Well, and the formative nature of it's what's the important part. We're using it
Huge.
to observe and then to use with focus on the needs of children and meeting the individual needs of the kids, and that's great. We did the same, and it's good to hear that. So, Marvine, I'm coming down, as you can see, down towards you. So in Fowler, you've got a strong commitment to using data. You heard Jordan talking about the data and how to shape strategies. Can you share a little bit about, what does that look like in Fowler?
Well, what we did was we were hoping that we could provide some evidence that early childhood does make a difference for children in the end. How successful are they going to be? We were definitely surprised when we realized how much more prepared these children are, but more importantly, how involved their parents are and stay committed, because we know that the majority of our parents with early childhood kids will be visible. But as the child progresses into elementary, into middle school, that has a tendency to back off. Parents aren't as involved. And I think with Head Start, what we learned is that it's a mandatory part. Parents need to be involved. But more importantly, we teamed up also with the American Dream Academy out of ASU to offer parenting courses for any parent who wanted to attend. But what it does is it gives them the confidence level of what to do when, how to ask the appropriate questions, when to step in, when to allow your own child to take care of things. But it's giving our parents that bit of confidence. So what we're seeing is far more parent involvement, which of course then has a big impact on how kids are going to perform, because they know when things are due, they know that they can access the kids' records online. And so for us, we have just been very, very just overwhelmed with the fact that our children continue to do well. We thought we would see a drop when we moved from Ames to AZ Merit. And in actuality, it basically is a lateral. It has been the same increase or difference in scores. As our children have stayed with us, of course, there's more that seem to be more proficient in the assessments. But more importantly is the value that the family has placed on their own children and how that has now seen to be more visible as they get into even to middle school. So they're more active in their child's day-to-day activities, but far more active in their academic life.
I'm going to stay with you, Marvin, because the post over there talks about the relationship with Read On. And so can you share about your district strategy to connect the early childhood to the K-3 system, and then your commitment to participate in Read On, say, Phoenix? And then why is this work important to building impact that eventually leads up to the third grade? But the early, tell us about that and how that's working your partnership.
Well, one of the things that Read On basically has as a focus, which we in Fowler truly believe in, is that an early literacy system that delivers the right program at the right time for every child. And so we all know that we all learn at different rates and at different times depending on what is in front of us. And what I appreciate about Read On is that there's no one cure for every child. They have so many different opportunities for us as educators to participate, to be able to share information. All of our schools definitely are partners with Read On. We have tried many of the different things. One of the things they came up with right now that when I was looking online earlier, is that they are having a focus on library cards now for September. Now, for some of us, we do the Kindles and all the electronic things, but for others, we like to still hold a book. Mm-hmm. But how many of our children have been into a public library? And I sat back and I thought, you know what? We're taking a field trip, and we're going to start with our kindergarten kids, and we're going to go to the library that's closest to us, bring parents along, and get those library cards. It doesn't cost them anything except the drive to the library, and those are avenues that Read On puts out there that I think if we took our time to really look at all they offer, our communities would be so much wealthier just in resources for our kids.
Appreciate that. Coming your way, Dawn. So the governor talked a little bit earlier and highlighted a few points, but there's a new grant, a planning grant from the National Governors Association. I think he called it Developing a Comprehensive Strategy for Early Child Care. At least that's what it says on the card here. So can you tell us a little bit more about that work, and where do you see it going to help out on the state?
Sure. I thank you, Superintendent. I can talk about that, but I'd like to talk just very quickly about the context in which that grant happened, which is, so the governor, my boss, took office in January of 2015, and in my first week, one of the very first calls that I received for a meeting was from the state literacy director. Now, I've been in education for almost 20 years. I didn't know we had a state literacy director. And it was one of my first meetings, and I met the lovely Terry Clark. And I've been in an 18-month Terry Clark early literacy tutoring program since then. And every time I have a question or I read some research and I want to understand how it applies to Arizona kids, my first call is to Terry and to say, hey, how is this working here? Is it effective? Is this something we need to talk about? And the governor's perspective on literacy since the campaign, he's been very focused on third grade reading.
But I think that those of you who have been watching him, he's been progressively more vocal about leading the work that leads up to third grade reading. So to your point, Superintendent, starting in kindergarten is oftentimes maybe not soon enough.
Right.
And so you noticed in his speech he talked a great deal about the experiences that kiddos have in the early years with their parents and their grandparents and caregivers, and the value that a quality early education program has on literacy. And so a lot of that has to do with the education that I've received, that I've been able to pass on from Terry. So I want to embarrass her and say you've really been influential in moving our office towards that concept. And because we've been moving towards that, when we saw that the National Governors Association was focused on early care and early education and put out this planning grant, my very first call was to Terry. I said, do you want to do this? And honestly, she told me she was in the middle of crafting an email to me to ask if we could. And so it seemed like a perfect opportunity to look at a comprehensive strategy around early care and early education built on the foundation of the governor's desire to improve literacy in Arizona. And so for many of our kiddos, those early years are critical. And so we were able to convene. I'm very proud to say most of the significant organizations that are working in early care and early education. Sam First Things First Ginger is a really important part of our team. The Department of Education, Carol Lippert and her team. The Department of Economic Security that's doing a lot of workforce around early care and has the early intervention programs. Carrie Taylor. We've got folks from the Education Coalition, or the Early Education Coalition. And we are in the process of working with NGA to develop a strategy that we can put forth for the governor to support around 3 principles, and he mentioned it today. It's around increasing quality and access, and in his mind, the very first thing we need to do is to increase educator capacity in early education. That means we need more teachers, and we need folks to want to be in these early care programs and to be trained to do it and to sustain and to recruit and retain. We also need to focus on our best practices. We know that there's a lot of great programs out there. We need to be able to replicate them and to provide more opportunities for students. They shouldn't be on wait lists. If a family wants their child or children in an early education program, they should have quality access in their communities. This is not different than the governor's desire around quality education for all students in the K-12 sphere. We know that for many of our students, success in school does not start in kindergarten. It starts in the home, and it starts in quality preschool or any other sort of environment. So I'm very thrilled to be able to convene all of these important folks to talk about this, and then to give the governor, I think, a strategy that we can all get around, that we can all support by leveraging all of the good work that's happening and all of the resources. I think that one of the things that we talked about early on in this group was that there's some silos. And if we can bring folks together and inventory what we're doing well and identify the gaps, we can focus on filling those gaps and I think move the needle for many of our well-deserving children. So thank you, Superintendent.
Appreciate it. For those that aren't aware, the colleges of ed are, again, you heard Dawn talk about the pipeline and the need for quality educators in those classrooms. They're down about 26%. And so we are going to have to put our heads together and craft a way for folks that want to choose early childhood education and then to focus on how do we get them to choose those professional fields, because at that rate, we're going to have a difficulty, especially with so many baby boomers retiring. And so we're going to have to put our heads together and figure that out. Earlier, we heard Pearl talk about partnerships, and so I would like to talk a little bit. Riley, can you talk about, in your district, some of the community partners, because you're up in Bullhead City. So I'm coming to Riley, and then we'll pass it down. I got a little bit more time, not too much, but community partnerships. What are you doing up there, especially for those of us that have been in rural communities before? What are you doing with community partnerships up there that help your early intervention?
I think when money is the issue, collaboration is an answer. And it requires everybody to get in the room. I'm, by way of confession, I have 5 daughters, no sons, 5 daughters. And so the beauty of it is when we ask these questions, I look through my own children's eyes and say, what is it that I want for my child? And if you get the right people in the room, you know, as I said, there's no obstacle that you can't overcome. We have a phenomenal partnership with the city. Yeah, the local Boys and Girls Club is a block away from several of our schools, and they do an awful lot to work with our programs. We do have 21st Century Community Learning Centers in our community at our schools, and the local athletics group has been an important piece. I was in a meeting earlier today, a faith-based breakout session, and we were talking about, you know, who is it that really moves the needle, and I believe the consensus was it's the soccer moms that move the world. How do you engage that group, and how do you harness that power? And so when you get, you know, as I said, when you can get people in the room and say, what is it that you want for your child? How can we collectively overcome this obstacle? You know, good things happen. First Things First is a phenomenal partner in this state. First Things First was not designed to be the early childhood program in this state. I think a strong argument can be made that it's kept us afloat, and we've accomplished great things there. But you know, once we're supplementing with First Things First, this state is going to soar. So we need to figure out with the business community and others. First Things First has let out in that initiative, but locally we can do a better job.
So we've just got a few more minutes for the panel. So as Terry said, we're talking about the early pipeline, you know, early literacy pipeline. Any closing thoughts on future or direction? You talked, Dawn, a little bit about the need to bring everybody to the table. Any closing thoughts from the panelists that want to share before we close this up?
Yeah, I'll chime in here real quick. You know, it's clear data shows that attendance matters, right? So how do you get the kids to school? Well, the school needs to be relevant, needs to be fun, it needs to be a place that they want to come and attend. And in regards to literacy, one thing that I'm most proud of is I taught 5th grade, and I have the privilege to stay in touch with some of my former students as they reach their early adulthood, and they still recall the stories we read in class. And I would bust out into a character or dress up as to kind of go along with the theme of the story. So make reading fun for your kids. You teachers are actors and actresses and performers. So really take that to heart, and I think that's just the simplest way to model a love of reading for our students. It's critical.
I just, you know, we're talking mostly about typical kids here, right? As we want our typically developing kids all to have the opportunity to be reading well by 3rd grade. But there are certainly about 18 to 20% of kids who have some developmental or behavioral disorder, and the research is very strong that early intervention is effective, right? And that means our Birth to 3 program, Arizona Early Intervention Program. Unfortunately, you can only get into AZIP in our state if you have 50% or more delayed. And that means that the children with more mild delays, especially those language delays, which is the most common delay, and certainly we know that language delay leads to learning disabilities in reading and written expression, dyslexia, and those kids aren't getting those services. And so we, in my opinion, I think we really need to find a way to serve those kids that don't meet that 50% delay, because those are the kids with the more mild delays, the more mild disabilities benefit the most from early intervention. And so if we can find a way to provide services to those children and those families to support their language development, then we'll have more kids reading by 3rd grade.
So I like to say I'm that soccer mom, because I'm sure you all realize that these are the real heroes in the room. These are these folks up here, and all of you, you're practitioners. I'm a student of of your work, and I learn every day. And as a parent, I do see what we do through the eyes of my child. And I have a third grader this year, so we're very focused around reading. But I wanted to share with you, from my perspective, one of the most profound moments in my career, and it has to do with first things first, and it has to do with the birth of my daughter. We found a very wonderful quality child care preschool program in Phoenix. Unfortunately, it's no longer operational, but it was fantastic. And when we started there, one of the first things that I received was the First Thing packet. And in it, there was all sorts of instructional material on the care of your child and, you know, their health and their minds and their bodies and their hearts and all of those good things. But in that packet was a book, a children's book. And at the time, I didn't understand why. And I had been in education a long time, and I was a mom. I was a little bit older mom, so maybe that was part of it. But I talked to First Things First, and I said, why do you put a book in here? And the answer I received is that when a child has a book in their home and they have a book that is theirs, they have a profound pride in reading it, owning it, and they want more. And so if you can get a book in every home, in every child's hands from birth, that love will continue, that love of reading will continue through their lives. And it never occurred to me at that moment that there was a house where there wasn't a book. Mm-hmm. And it was a profound moment, and ever since then, everything we've done, and every time we go to a school and we talk about literacy, we make sure that we put a book in every child's hands. Because I want, if I have any goal in my entire life, is that every child should own their own book or books. And the public library is a wonderful thing, but having books in the home, it creates a love of reading and imagination and creativity, and every child deserves to have their own book. So I hope that you all can tell by that story how passionate we are and the governor is about making sure that our students, our kids, learn to read, but that they love to read. Mm-hmm. And that those are two different things, but hopefully they converge. So I think that, you know, all the work you do is spectacular, and teaching your students to love to read is probably the greatest gift that you will ever give them. So thank you.
May I just say one thing? Everyone in this room is an educator in some form, and I would just like to challenge you this Halloween. Many of us sit out on our driveways and watch the children come up our driveway, and you give out candy and popcorn, whatever it is that you choose for that year. But I ask you to go to the Dollar Tree, go to a used bookstore, and pick up some books. And when you see those children who come up your driveway, and they're probably going to be your preschoolers, your 4, your 3, your 2-year-olds, hand mom that book. And you go ahead and give the kids a treat because they want the treat. But help our moms help their children. As was clearly stated earlier, every parent wants to do a good job. We have to get the resources in their hands, and it has to start with us.
I just wanted to, I think that's a great, about that. I just want to make mention that I personally think that this is a landmark year in our state. We have not had a budget surplus to speak of for a very long time, and I know the details of that, having been in schools for as long as I have. So I would certainly hope that everybody who is in this conversation can go out and share with our parents the imperative need to demand from our legislators funding for these projects. Early childhood education, early childhood programs, I think are the key to solving all of our problems. And if we can convince those people and demand that, then change can happen.
And I'll close again. I'm a Thank you, Don. We're all working folks here. I'm a working superintendent, and I think the word I want to leave you with is to advocate. You heard practices today from this panel of creating a pipeline, the earliest possible intervention, the meeting the child's need, whether they're typical or atypical. They're kids, and they want to learn, and they thirst for that. So if you would, like Riley mentioned, I would say to you, you can't leave the conference and just do nothing. You've got to pick up the telephone, and you've got to share what you now have been armed with, which is information to share with folks to say, we're now, I'll come back to our educators. We're now competing with 49 other states for this thing known as human capital, or educators, early childhood educators. And so we need teachers in our classrooms to make a difference. There'll be no computer program that will take the place of an effective teacher in the classroom. So advocate. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone and do it again and do it again. There's an old term, gentle pressure applied regularly or relentlessly. And so please do that. Please don't just leave this conference without taking your turn to pick up your telephone and share what you've learned from the panel or any of the other conference. If you would, can we please give a round of applause for the astute panel that's been here today?
Yes, you're free to go now. So can we give one